What's up, everyone? DJ Short here from Rotoworld. I'm joined by Eric Samulski, and it's time for our usual Tuesday live fantasy baseball Q&A on the NBC Sports YouTube page. We'll be here probably the next 30-40 minutes to go over anything that's on your mind in the world of fantasy baseball, whether it's waiver wire pickups, stashes, injury situations, streamers, whatever you want to talk about. We're happy to do it. Eric, how's it going?
Yeah, not so bad. I had a good it's weird we had 1 day baseball game yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We have one today. I feel like I want more.
Yes.
Like the game, especially yesterday, because the game was at 11 and so it ended at 2 and you were like, all right, what's next? And it's like, oh,
yes.
Okay, 4.5 hours. We'll wait and then we'll get something.
I know. I would take one afternoon game a day during the work week. You know what I mean? Like I'm good with that. What's really depressing is when you have to wait all day for a baseball game.
And I guess our work week is different than other people's.
True.
Like when my work week is writing baseball news, like I would love if baseball was just on all day because it's what I'm doing. But yes, I know. But I do love at least Wednesdays. We've started to get more day baseball. Obviously, the sun has decided to show up in New York, and so day baseball in the sun. There's nothing better.
It's amazing outside. I love it. Windows open, don't have to put the AC on quite yet. Like that is the perfect ideal window for me, but it will be over shortly, I'm sure.
I'm sure it will.
So like I said, we'll be here for the next 30 to 40 minutes. Feel free to throw your questions in the chat and we will try to get to it. Give a little bit more time for folks to get in here, but Rhino has a question to start us off. Already a lot of prospect conversation, especially with Jackson Holliday coming up. It's kind of like, who's next?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not Paul Skeens, Rhino asks, which prospect do you think is up first, and who do you think produces out of the gate? Keston Herstad, Junior Caminero, or James Wood?
I think it's Caminero. I mean, we talked about this a little bit. Scott Pianowski and I talked about this a little bit on the Rotoworld baseball show. You should listen to that wherever you can. That I think Kjerstad he's blocked right now. Like with Cowser hitting as well as he's hitting, the Orioles already have too many outfielders. They just called up Jackson Holliday.
Yeah.
And Jordan Westberg is off to a really good start. So there's no room for Kjerstad unless Ryan O'Hearn starts to struggle. And that seems to be the only avenue for Kjerstad, which is as like a DH first base outfield type. If O'Hearn struggles, and O'Hearn is not struggling right now. The Rays are not getting a lot out of their DH spot. We know they're battling injuries, with Jonathan Aranda, with Brandon Lau. So Junior Caminero was out with a quad injury. He is now back. I think if he gets, a little bit of time under his belt in the minors and just kind of like gets the timing back on his swing, like I would not be shocked if we saw him sometime around the start of May, because the Rays could use that bat in the lineup right now.
It's been interesting to see what James Wood has done. I was very curious to see how he would follow up like the really huge spring training that he had, but he's off to an incredible start in AAA so far this season. More walks than strikeouts, has a 500 on base percentage and an 1130 OPS so far. I was thinking maybe he was like a second half call up, but like
I know Chris Crawford, is high on him. Chris writes a great column for us every Monday where he looks at, prospects to stash. It's well worth a read over at NBC Sports. I know he has James Wood high up on that list. A couple weeks ago when we did the Q&A together, we talked about that, and I get everything Chris is saying, and then in the back of my head, it's just like, it's the Nationals. They're not contending.
Yeah.
Like, are they really going to call him up? Yes, they have Gallo and Winker and Rosario. Winker, though, has actually looked pretty good to start the year.
Yeah.
I think even though those guys are replaceable, I think the Nationals would prefer to get some value out of those guys and trade them rather than just cut them.
Yeah,
and so
like
I think
hit on one or two and trade
that
them.
requires some time. right?
Yeah.
To see if those guys can actually do that. And if you're not competing this year, like just give James Wood until June. I feel like is what they're probably going to be doing.
I would agree with you. I think Caminero has the clearest path to get to the majors and to make an impact. Obviously, what Kjerstad and Wood are doing in AAA is interesting, but I think more of something we'll see a couple of months from now, most likely. But that could change. Dad with a question, fellow dad. What on earth do I do with Dalton Varsho? Just when I thought he was out, he has back-to-back homers. Are his struggles indicative of Toronto as a whole, or is his cold start more of an individual issue? I was kind of in on Varsho after what he did in spring training this year, so I wasn't thinking too much about the about the cold start, excuse me. But in general, I think he's a lot less appealing in mixed leagues now than he was a year ago because he's no longer catcher eligible. But just with steals being more prominent around the league, like he just doesn't really stand out from the pack for me. But I do think he should be rostered in most mixed leagues. Curious, what do you think?
Yeah, I also bought in late because everybody was talking about the swing change and he looked really good in the spring. There are some things that interest me, and so I'm looking. We'll do this in real time. I'm looking on Fangraphs, just looking at some of the process-oriented stats that I like to look at if I'm determining what's going on with the player. Strikeout rate is only up 1% from last year. His walk rate is up almost 2%. You'd like to see that. He's not hitting the ball particularly hard. Why is he not hitting the ball particularly hard? Well, he's hitting 54% fly balls, but his average launch angle is up 10 degrees to 30 degrees. A 30-degree launch angle it's just too high. That is absurdly high. He has a 32% infield fly ball rate. Right?
Not sustainable.
That's
probably
clearly not good, right?
Yeah.
But then you look at like, okay, he's chasing out of the zone less. He's swinging inside the zone more. He's making more contact in the zone. His swinging strike rate is under 10% now. It has gotten less every year. So I see a guy who's making better swing decisions. He's making more contact, but the swing path or what he's trying to do to lift on the swing is causing this egregious lift launch angle, which is leading to infield fly balls. We have seen guys correct for that in season, especially when you consider that this is a guy who ran a 20% line drive rate last year. So like if he just kind of goes back to his old approach, we might get the last year's version of Dalton Varsho, who is making fewer bad swing decisions, which then leads to like a slightly better year than last year. So I don't know that you're getting like a full on breakout, but what if we got 2022 again, where he hit 235 with, 25 home runs and 16 steals? Like, that is still rosterable in deeper formats as an outfielder, but I don't know that we're getting like some brand new level where he's like a 260, 270 hitter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, I mean, I guess, he's tried to make some adjustments, so it's sort of an experiment in real time, and we'll see how he adjusts to his early season production. Another early season, I don't know if it's quite a panic situation, but Cody Bellinger here. Is Cody Bellinger a buy low, or did he just produce last year to get a long-term deal? He hadn't done anything in the previous 5 seasons. It feels that way. It might be true. Who knows? I'm willing to be patient here. However, I do think last year's numbers were not truly reflective. We talked about this leading into the season, that it wasn't truly reflective of the batted ball information that we had coming out of last year.
Yeah, I think so. I think we talked about like how his approach was shifting on 2 strikes and no strikes and all that sort of stuff. And so I think that we knew that approach might lead to like the batting average might sustain, but the home run power might not. I still think that like, the batting average, he had a 320 BABIP last year, so he wasn't going to hit 307, but I still believed he could hit 270, 280 with this approach. And I still feel like it's possible. Like he has a 12.5% walk rate and a sub 17% strikeout rate. Like he's drawing walks. He's making contact. It almost feels like he's trying to to hit more home runs. Like he's pulling the ball more and lifting the ball way more. And that isn't necessarily good if you're not really driving the ball with authority, as we mentioned. His swinging strike rate is also way up. So I think like he's trying to get to that power maybe more often. And he should just go back to what he was doing last year, right? His contact rate is way down.
Yeah.
He's trying to hit for more power. It's almost like he heard the whole offseason narrative and was like, I can hit for power. And now he's not, and the batting average isn't there. But I think what we saw was real, and I think we could see an adjustment back.
Yeah. What's interesting with him is that even after he won his MVP, he changed his swing. And it's just like, dude, no. Please don't. Please don't. And what's also funny is his batting average and his expected batting average are the same. It's not often you see that, but it tells you he's kind of deserved what he's had, even with, the plate discipline isn't bad, but he's putting the ball in the air like 56% of the time. So, and now not a lot of them are leaving the ballpark right now. So, but I do think he'll hit higher than 156 remainder, or 180 the remainder of the season. You've heard it here first, people.
Yeah. And if you want to wait till he gets on a hot streak and trade him because you don't think he's going to meet last year, like that's fine. But I don't think anybody really thought that he was going to meet last year. So I don't really know what you're getting. Yeah. But again, like the question of, is he a buy low? Like, I think so, in the sense that like, depending on your league format, the person may be so down on him because the narrative around him this offseason was so negative.
Yeah.
That if you're able to get him and, think of him as like a 270, 20 homer hitter in a good lineup, and you can acquire that type of player, right? So you're not giving up like an ace for him, but you're giving up, like maybe you're giving up a hot starting pitcher who we don't really know what they're going to do in the long term. Like I still think I'd be trying to get somebody like Cody Bellinger.
How worried are you about, say, a Suzuki's oblique situation?
A little bit, because that was what sidelined him last year.
Exactly.
I always think about the podcast we did where we were like, I think at the end of July or early August, we were like talking about guys we were going to cut bait on. And I was like, I'm done. I can't hold Seiya Suzuki anymore. And then he just went on an absolute tear. But a lot of that was because he started the year late because of the oblique. And then it took him a while to get going.
Yep.
I wonder if like he's a pretty thick, like muscly dude. And that torque in his swing, like it might just be a consistent issue with his body type that he's going to have these oblique injuries. They've been a little consistent for him coming to the major leagues. So it doesn't feel great.
Yeah. And I feel like even when players come back, usually you hear it after the season where they're like, my side bothered me all year.
Well, like we were at the end of July, we were still like, I don't really know. It took him months to get back. So if you give him like maybe 2 months to get back to being like the version of him that we know he can be, it could be a while before we see that. And so like, you're not cutting him. You're trying to keep him in your IL. You're hoping that, there's a version of him that, comes back sooner, but it's a little concerning.
Yep. Another Cubs related question here. Would you play Vaughn Grissom over Nico Horner when he returns? Nico is killing me in my Roto league. I would not, but
no.
Curious your insight.
I mean, obviously, like we have like 2 more weeks until Vaughn Grissom returns, or a week and a half. So my answer might change by then, but no, I'm not overly worried about Nico Horner. And I think given where you were drafting Nico Horner and what you needed to get from him in terms of his stolen base total, like you're not getting that from Vaughn Grissom. So by taking Horner out of your lineup for Grissom, you might improve your batting average, but that's probably it.
Yeah. And, I think with Nico Horner, like you're not going to get power, you know what I mean? But he needs to get on base. And right now it's weird. He has a 250 batting average on balls in play. Batting 208, but has more walks than strikeouts right now. But yeah, when you're not getting that power production, and that can take its toll on your lineup if you're not getting the help you at least thought you were going to get. in average and steals, and he's not even providing that. But I think overall, seeing like the plate discipline numbers, he has a 371 on base percentage so far this season.
Yeah,
I do think he's going to be fine.
and you're kind of like, why is he not running right now? So we'll see.
It's true. That's a good point. But I do think it's very likely that Vaughn Grissom will hit more home runs than Nico Horner this season. I think that will probably happen. But I think Nico will be more valuable in terms of runs scored and stolen bases and lineup spot and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Question from David. He has Mitch Garver. Thin pickings on the waiver wire. Any names I could potentially look at? So, if you have Mitch Garver on your team, chances are you have him in a catcher spot. So that makes it a little that makes it a little trickier to find a replacement. I would say like the trendy kind of name right now that I saw, at least as far as the ads this weekend, was Ivan Herrera with the Cardinals.
Yeah, but my concern is like,
is he going to play enough?
Yeah, Nootbaar is back, and they've still been playing Victor Scott in the outfield because of his defense, which means they're, Nootbaar is going to DH, Brendan Donovan's going to DH. Like, I don't know if Herrera's getting enough at bats.
Yeah.
I think like maybe Ryan Jeffers is interesting because he's DHing a decent amount because the Twins lineup is in shambles right now. So he's catching and DHing. If you're sorting by just plate appearances, he has the 17th most plate appearances at catcher this year. And he's hitting really well. I think like, but you start to get into it's dog days with like, guys you would pick up on waivers. Like, I guess Shea Langoliers is on a lot of waivers. We know he has power, but he's hitting 188. Luis Campusano's kind of, fallen off after the hot start. Alejandro Kirk is doing nothing. Danny Jansen's coming back, but we don't know how that situation is going to play out. I guess, with Kirk hitting 200, like Jansen could get more starts at catcher, but I don't know if he's going to play enough if you're in like a one catcher league.
Travis Darno might be a decent stopgap because Sean Murphy's still out with the oblique. Not someone I'd count on long term, but if you want a stopgap, I guess. I would rather have Garver though.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have Garver than most of what you're going to find on the waiver wire. Obviously, like if somebody was upset that like, Gabriel Moreno was starting slow, like you might find a guy who got cut. Bo Naylor is somebody who like, I know he's striking out too much and he wasn't playing a lot to start the year. That's something I would entertain because I do like Bo Naylor and he'll give you some speed. But again, like I like Garver and I think the Mariners lineup as a whole will get better. Like Julio Rodriguez is doing nothing right now. You're not cutting him. So you got to give guys a little bit.
You know what? Last week, I already have my biggest fantasy regret of the season. In our staff league, our office league for Rotoworld and NBC Sports, I had Michael Busch. I drafted him. Last week, I dropped him to get Starling Marte.
My biggest regret is I continue to talk about it on Twitter because it upsets me so much. But I put out that tweet 2 weeks ago about if you don't need immediate production, you should pick up Colton Cowser because Austin Hayes isn't doing well. And then in all but one of my NFBC formats, I didn't get him. I didn't bid, and I picked other people over him. He didn't even get picked up. And then obviously he went bananas last week and was going for like 300. And if I had listened to myself, I would have gotten him for like $4 before that happened.
Pay attention to yourself.
Yes.
Jackligher, a topic this morning. He's going to get the call up from the Rangers on Thursday to make his major league debut. And, he was super hyped in college. It felt like every start on that Vandy team, we tracked it. And the road to the majors has been a little bumpier than I think a lot of us expected, sort of to the point where last year he lost a lot of his prospect sheen. But late in the year, he turned it on a bit. He's looked very good so far this season in AAA. The question here, what is this 2024 outlook? Is this more of a spot start or something long-term? Now, Eric, you take a look at pitchers who have changed their arsenal, tried to gain more spin, all that kind of stuff. what do you see from Jackligher that makes you optimistic or pessimistic?
Yeah, they changed his delivery, and like pretty drastically. Like if you watch video of him early in 2023 and watch video of him now, like his windup is entirely different. It's not just like changing where he stood on the rubber. The goal was to improve his command. He's done that. I believe it's 24 strikeouts to 3 walks in AAA so far. And that has kind of allowed the fastball to play up a little more because we know he has really good velocity on the fastball, but he wasn't commanding it in the zone. He's been throwing it up a little more with like, with actual command, like up in the zone. And so you like to see that. This, I think, is the Rangers have 17 straight games. They play 17 straight games. So this to me is them going to a 6-man rotation for the next 3 weeks with Cody Bradford on the shelf. And so that's lighter. And then what's his 2024 outlook? I think what happens over the next, he probably gets at least 2 starts in this run, maybe 3 in this run of games. And then what happens with that? Does he, is he able to kind of secure a spot over somebody like Andrew Heaney, who's not looking really great, or somebody like Michael Lorenzen, who they can move to the bullpen, or does he get bumped? And so that kind of impacts his 2024 outlook a little bit. It looks like DJ's frozen. So I'll use this time to also just talk about Andy Pages, who was called up is being called up by the Dodgers. And we don't necessarily know the other corresponding move right now. But Andy Pages is getting called up, the outfield prospect, by the Dodgers. They're currently starting, Kike Hernandez in the outfield. Chris Taylor's been terrible. Taylor Trammell is a left-handed bat, but he hasn't been great. Pages has been crushing AAA. So that could be a situation where he gets a legitimate shot. I know lots of prospect writers that have talked about his improved contact rate this year. And he's making 80% contact overall, 86% zone contact, 92 mile per hour average exit velocity currently. So those are things where it's not just like the environment that he is playing in, it's that he's making a lot more contact and we know he hits the ball hard. He's a top 100 prospect. If he gets a shot to play regularly for the Dodgers, like that's something that you want to take a gamble on.
What level of a pickup are we talking about here? Like in a 12-team league, would you take a chance on Pages?
Yes, I would. Last year, we know he only played 34 games. So, if you're going back to the last 2 full seasons, I mean, in 2021, it was 31 homers and 6 steals. In 2022, it was 26 homers and 6 steals. He stole 7 bases last year in just 33 games. He has 5 homers and 2 steals through 15 games in AAA this year. So, like, if he is playing every day, or if he's playing, often enough for the Dodgers, there is a legitimate chance with his improved contact that he's giving you homers and steals. And maybe, he never had a high strikeout rate. Like we're talking about 24%, 22%. Now he's under 20. So like that could lead to a decent enough batting average. Like, I know James Outman is like left-handed, but like, is that not a similar type of profile to James Outman, but with less strikeouts, potentially less speed? But I don't know. I think it's worth a stash to see how the Dodgers use him in the early going, because there is a chance that he gets regular starts with those older players not looking good. And that's valuable.
Right. I'm always a little hesitant about the Dodgers because it feels like, especially with young position players, they don't necessarily give them like that free runway. Yeah. But maybe it'll be different now because they're just running out of options.
Yeah. I mean, I think also like maybe they're looking at what Michael Busch is doing and they're like, oh, we should have given him a little bit more of an opportunity here.
Sure.
So I don't really, I mean, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but it's entirely possible. Like, Pages is somebody who has earned the call up. They certainly shouldn't be giving Taylor Trammell at bats over him just because he's right-handed. But we have to see how it all shakes out. I think at this point, like watching Chris Taylor hit, like he should not be in the plans anymore.
Right.
And you have Enrique Hernandez who does the same things, like plays all over the field. And so just, make that swap is what I would do.
So the second part of this question is about the Pacific Coast League and how it inflates hitters. Like, we say that all the time, but what is truly the reason for that? I think it's fairly, it's overly simplistic for me to say this, but it's warmer. I think that helps hitters as opposed to those who are, in the International League, mostly playing on the East Coast when temperatures are lower. Then you also have just the higher altitude at most of those ballparks, the dry air, the ball just naturally travels further, gives hitters an advantage. Any other insight you have on why those PCL ballparks are so hitter friendly?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, in June of last year, Jeff Zimmerman wrote an article on Fangraphs where he tried to show the difference between playing in the PCL and Major League Baseball. And he said that it increased batting averages by 0.080. It increased on base percentage by 0.107. It increased OPS by almost 300. A lot of that is the fields, right? A lot of the fields in the Pacific Coast League are in warmer climates. Warmer climates leads to, the ball traveling farther. We know this when the summer gets around here in like stadiums like Cleveland and Baltimore, and you always talk about when it gets hot in July and August, like the ball is going to carry.
Yep.
And so I think there is a lot of that. And then there's also like altitude stuff, right? Like PCL parks, Colorado Springs, that's high altitude. Tucson is high altitude. Las Vegas is pretty high altitude. Salt Lake City is high altitude. Like Reno, Albuquerque, like these are all fields where it's like, and I think I know those were all PCL fields. I believe they still are all in the PCL, but I know minor league shift around a lot. But the basic point is like you've got dry, high altitude climates that are humid, and so the ball's just going to carry a lot more.
Right, exactly. So up next, a question about Paul Goldschmidt. How concerned are you about Goldschmidt? Can't start him at this point, but not sure I can cut him either. I would not cut Paul Goldschmidt this early. Do I have concerns? Yes, the strikeout rate's around 30%. Some of these plate discipline numbers can be sticky early. You can start looking at it, a couple weeks into the season and start to make some determinations. But, Paul Goldschmidt is 2 years removed from an MVP. You cannot cut him. Mm-hmm. But given his age, I am a little bit concerned about the bat slowing down potentially.
Yeah, I don't love that he's chasing outside of the zone more. He's making less contact overall. His swinging strike rate is up overall. He's getting challenged in the zone more, it seems. I do like that, the pull rate is up and he's hitting a lot more line drives. So like theoretically that should work. But he's not hitting the ball overly hard, and he's swinging and missing a lot. And I do think that could be. I had been a proponent of him coming into the year because I said I really don't think we're seeing the age as much drop off as much as last year's stats indicated. And I may have just been wrong on that. Like we may have been seeing an age drop off that we are continuing to see right now. But also that whole team is a mess. So who knows?
Yes. Up next, do you like Jackligher or Paul Blackburn? I'm going to say lighter because of the win potential. That's just me.
Yeah, I think it is like you're talking about all of these in the short term because we don't know if lighter actually sticks in the rotation. Blackburn gets a pretty good matchup against those Cardinals that we were just talking about. That the team is just an utter mess right now. It looks like Blackburn gets the Cardinals and then he gets the Yankees and then the Orioles. So yeah, it's going to be Jackligher because you could start Paul Blackburn against the Cardinals maybe, but you're cutting him or not starting him against the Yankees and Orioles. So I think you'd rather take the upside on lighter.
All right. How do you feel about Jose Butto? Is he the real deal? We've talked a little about Buto, even going back to spring training. I don't know, because if you go by like the stuff plus, like you can sort that on Fangraphs and see where different pitchers rate. Like I don't really see anything that knocks my socks off with Buto, but I did, I've watched all of his starts so far, and the changeup has been a serious weapon for him. I think he's evolved to the point where I would not be surprised if he keeps a rotation spot moving forward on that team. That good enough to be a mixed league pickup? I look at him as more of a streamer at this point, but I do think he can be someone that sticks in the back end of the Mets rotation moving forward.
Yeah, I will just, I guess, tease that he is in my Mixing It Up article, which comes out tomorrow morning on NBC Sports,
Nice.
because he has added a sweeper and changed his slider. I believe the idea was to add more swing and miss to his game because he didn't have much. I will just say that it is currently not working. That doesn't mean it won't work, because the changes are interesting to me. But, we see sometimes it takes a while for those kind of new pitches and pitch mix changes to really take effect. So I would encourage everybody to read that article, which comes out Wednesday morning, and just say that the teaser on it is maybe he could be better than he currently is, and he's probably a streamer at the moment.
Right. Another pitcher who's off to a great start, Reed Detmers. Cy Detmers season. Are you buying the early numbers? I say yes. I think he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball so far, and to me, the numbers back it up. But where do you fall on that?
Well, I encourage everybody to check out last week's article, Mixing It Up, where I led with Reed Detmers. And the big thing for me was focusing on the fastball. He has added more induced vertical break on the fastball, which is what we had commonly referred to as rise, right? Where it seems like the fastball is rising because it doesn't drop as much. And he's also throwing the pitch more up in the strike zone. What's even better is that he's throwing the pitch out of the strike zone up more often. And so he's getting more chases in 2-strike counts. And so we're actually seeing way more swing and miss on his fastball. And he has always been a guy who was carried by his breaking pitches. So the fact that his fastball is not only better, but is missing more bats, gives him a little bit more of a ceiling, because it means that he's not putting as much pressure on the breaking pitches. So I still don't know that he has a great fastball, but the location on it right now is really good, and I buy into it. And if the location on the fastball starts to waver a little bit, I think it'll start getting hit a little more, and the numbers could come down. But as of right now, I really like what I see.
He's throwing the changeup more this season as well.
Yeah,
and
he started doing that. He started doing that at the end of last year. And what I really like about it is the pitch doesn't grade out well. He's throwing it over 10% of the time this year. He threw it just 5% last year. The pitch doesn't grade out well, but he throws it in the zone a lot. And so I think the idea is yes, the changeup might not be a great pitch if you just judge by shape and movement and whatever, but he now has a fastball he throws up in the zone that is a better pitch, and he has 2 really good breaking balls. And sometimes just being able to drop that changeup in for righties for a strike is really helping him deepen his arsenal, and again take pressure off of his breaking balls to do everything for him. And so that, I think, makes him a more consistent, stable pitcher.
Right. Time for a couple more questions here. How would you rank these players head-to-head points redraft? Of course, the hottest, maybe the hottest hitter in baseball right now, Michael Busch, Rhys Hoskins, Christian Encarnacion Strand with the Reds, and Ke'Bryan Hayes.
That's tough. Points leagues, we're talking about, we're rewarding power more in points leagues. I believe some points leagues are also taking away from strikeouts. I think the most common format, though sometimes people change it. In that instance, I still weirdly think I'm putting Hoskins higher than Bush because I do think the swing and miss for Bush will be greater than we're seeing right now. I think I have them both above CES, who is striking out a ton right now, and not really barreling the ball at all for the Reds. And then it's tough with Ke'Bryan Hayes because I really like him in normal formats where if I get like 15 home runs and 15 steals, like that's really good from him. That's not as great in points leagues. The steals component is nice. I might go like Hoskins, Hayes, Bush, CES.
That's what I was
top of my
thinking
head.
as well. Yeah. Unfortunate to put CES that low, but in a points league, you kind of have to. And I do worry with the struggles that he had and that he's had so far, like how patient can the Reds be? I mean, I know they're missing some people at this point.
That's where it's weird to say, like, well, the Reds don't have anybody to take his spot. So, but I think that's where we're at. Like the Reds don't have anybody to take his spot. So
up next, what do you make of the Braves starter situation? Is Bryce Elder worth holding? Elder has been passed over twice for call-up so far, which I think is interesting. When you look at Elder last year, he was an all-star, if I remember correctly. But from a fantasy perspective, I think we were waiting for the other shoe to drop pretty much all year with Elder, and it didn't quite happen. But I wonder how much we should look into the fact that he hasn't gotten an opportunity yet.
Yeah, I think it depends on how deep a league you're in, right? Like Elder's looking solid through 2 starts in AAA. He was good numbers wise in the majors last year. I don't think anybody bought that. If you're in a really deep league, like he might get another shot. So I think that he's worth rostering right now. Like, Ian Anderson isn't coming back. AJ Smith-Shawver has had a rough start to the year. Like I still believe in Smith-Shawver and I think that he will get a chance this year, but he's thrown 3 innings in 2 starts because he has been getting hit around. You have Hurston Waldrop is a little far away. Huascar Yanoa hasn't yet pitched in the minors this year. So there's just not a lot out there. Like it's Alan Winans and Darius Vines and, I guess Dylan Dodd and Bryce Elder. It's like all the same guys that Elder was competing with last year and was ahead of. So in deeper formats or in, NL only leagues, like you can still hold, but like Darius Vines was solid yesterday. So he's going to get another shot. So it might be a while before Elder even gets that chance.
Yeah. The Braves rotation is interesting and you could see things going bad very quickly. You have some older pitchers on that staff. You have Max Reed in his walk here, but someone who's he's had some injuries in recent years. Last year there was an elbow thing or a forearm.
Right.
But that lineup is so good.
Right. You got Charlie Morton is not looking great. Reynaldo Lopez is looking good, but has always faltered at one point, That's why I think like you do see Smith-Shawver and probably Waldrop at some point this year, but I just think like they have to earn it. They're not just going to be given that opportunity.
Yeah. We'll finish with this question. I really like this question because it requires kind of a leap of faith to take a chance on one of these guys in a 10-team league. So it's a good question. Ben Brown, Edward Cabrera, who was great last night, has returned from the IL, his season debut. Reese Olson, Gavin Stone. Which waiver pitcher would you pick up in a 10-team Roto league? 10 is like a little thinner.
It's Cabrera for me, and it's not even close, to be honest with you. Like, I think Cabrera, if he can, like, Cabrera showed improved command in the spring, then got hurt. Last night's start was the same improved command. I don't know if it's fixed, you know what I mean? Like it's one start. We don't want to overreact, but he's the only guy on that list where I say, if this happens, right? If this tangible thing happens, he is a top 30 starting pitcher. If Edward Cabrera has better command,
Yeah.
If Edward Cabrera has better command, he's a top 30 starting pitcher. And I think that's a bench spot you could use in a 10-team league.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think 10-team leagues, we're kind of your bench spots are flexible. You can take a chance on a pitcher who has a 10 strikeout performance and who certainly has the stuff. The question has just always been that command and control, which has been so shaky for patches of time over the year. So yeah, I'm encouraged by the first start from Cabrera as well. So that'll wrap it up for this week. Make sure to tune into the Rotoworld Baseball Show. You'll have another episode coming tomorrow, Eric, yourself and Scott Pianowski. Do you have any preview for what you'll be covering there?
Yeah, we're going to look at we covered some plate discipline metrics for hitters last week. We're doing pitchers this week. We're looking at pitchers who have seen the biggest increases and decreases in their whiff rates. Trying to look at guys who we think may be actually on the verge of like a really good year, or guys who might be time to cut bait on because they are not missing bats as much as we'd like to see.
Awesome. Good stuff. Make sure to tune in for that and get the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We will see you next Tuesday at the usual time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Take care. Good luck in your leagues this week. See ya.